Zimbabwe cash crisis worse.
Talking about Venezuela once again.
Systemic important banks. They removed the 1,000 thing on there called monetary awareness. Hey there, hope all is well. Back at you today with some more RT News updates. And as you can tell from today, I'm going to be covering the subject of the dollar and how recently Stephen Mnuchin, Secretary of Treasury of our country, decided to mention out in public that a weaker dollar will be beneficial for the U.S., which I'm sure is not a good way of keeping good relations with our allies as well as our trading partners. But yet that's kind of where we're heading this year in 2018. Before I dive into those articles, as always, I want to encourage you, if you're new to RTD, to click the subscribe button for more RTD News updates, live talks, as well as interviews. And if you're new to Rethinking the Dollar altogether, I want to encourage you to visit the RTD University page, where I've put together all my prior interviews dealing with matters such as these in currency wars, precious metals, our monetary policy, and basic finance in general, so you can get a better understanding of what is happening right now and where we're heading in the future, possibly. So let's dive into those articles. So the very first article here is from Bloomberg, and it says, Trump team at Davos backs weaker dollar, sharpens trade war talk. The very next one here is from CNBC, and it says, Mnuchin comments surprises financial markets, turns dollar decline into a one-way bet. The next one here is from Financial Times, and it says, Mnuchin backs weaker dollar and break with tradition. And then the very last one here, we're going to cover a couple of thoughts that people are sharing on social media. And so as always, before I actually dive into these, I want to encourage you to take some time to scroll through these articles for yourself to get a better idea of what's actually happening with the Federal Reserve note, aka the dollar, and how this will impact us here in the United States of America as well as those around the world globally. And so it's my opinion that as this right here gets weaker, this right here can only get stronger. So in the days ahead, the dollar will continue to get weak, and it will be reflected in how many pieces of paper it takes to actually purchase a single piece of metal, and other things such as food, housing, clothing, and things of that nature. So it's only a matter of time before the weakening dollar continues to become a problem for not only the globe as far as those that hold Federal Reserve notes as well as treasuries and our debt in general, but then here in our country, those who are dependent upon the cost of living through using Federal Reserve notes. So let's get into the very first one. So Trump team at Davos backs weaker dollar, sharpens trade war talk. So briefly, a walkthrough where Steve Mnuchin is walking, I guess, from building to building out in Switzerland, and he hints at the idea of how the weaker dollar will be good for us. But what I want to pull out of this article here is the fact that it says, you wanted a weaker dollar, you got it. And so Trump himself is one of the first presidents in a very long time that decided to open up his mouth and share his thoughts on our monetary matters, such as the strength of the dollar. And he shared his interest as to how he wanted a weaker dollar. So here we have a weaker dollar. And so it shows a graph basically compared to the other G10 peers. And so the euro, Danish krona, British pound, Swedish krona. And so as of now, all these currencies are appreciating in value, which is reflected in a cheaper dollar, which for us sending goods out of this country is good, but yet countries sending stuff into our country is going to be more expensive. So if you're interested, there's more information here, but I just want to share that chart there. The next one here is from CNBC, and it says, Mnuchin comments surprises financial markets, turns dollar decline into a one-way bet. And then give you an idea what it's about. It says the dollar, already on a spiral lower, sank to a 3-year low after Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said a weaker dollar was good for U.S. trade. It says comments depart from strong dollar policy of Treasury secretaries before him, going back to Robert Rubin and the Clinton administration, but fit with Trump's administration America's first message. It says the weaker dollar policy could backfire and make U.S. assets like treasuries less appealing and drive up the cost of foreign goods for businesses and everyday Americans. Hint, everyday Americans, the costs for everyday Americans. And what was really eye-telling about this article here is that when asked, Robert Sinch, chief global strategist at Amherst Pierpoint, one of the things he said is, I think the dollar will stay the reserve currency. We're too big and too influential. But does it mean people have to hold so many dollar assets if the administration says this is not a good place to hold your money? Particularly with a $1 trillion deficit, there's a long way down. And so the idea that with a weaker dollar, people are realizing that it's more expensive to actually pay off their debts denominated in dollars. So a long-term option would be to hold less dollars, and holding less dollars will not be good for us because we need people to basically lend us money in order for us to keep our government afloat. So not a good policy, but yet I'm sure this is all designed for something greater down the line, which will lead to really pissing off a lot of our allies to really begin de-dollarizing their holdings because if they want a weaker dollar, who wants to hold something that retains less value? Hey there, just want to take a quick minute to interrupt this video to remind you to visit the rethinkingthedollar.com website, where you get a chance to see all of my postings as well as educational resources, and as well as visit the RTD store where I have some free material for you as well as some t-shirts. And if you're interested in being more of a blessing to Rethinking the Dollar, I want to encourage you to visit the RTD donation page where I have a couple links there for you to contribute to this alternative media of work. Other than that, let's get back to the show. Next one here, Mnuchin backs weaker dollar and break with tradition. Scroll down here, give you an idea what's going on. It says Mark Chandler of Brown Brothers Harriman said, while Mnuchin was only stating the obvious, Treasury Secretary since Rubin have never deviated from a strong dollar mantra. That mantra has never really meant much, but to deviate from it suggests the U.S. policymakers desire a weaker dollar. Since Rubin stated this policy after his predecessor, Lloyd Bentsen, used the exchange rate to pressure Japan into opening its markets, Mnuchin's comments pack an even bigger punch coming after the U.S. trade actions announced this week. So the idea that this whole trade, that Trump is deciding to pose tariffs on some goods coming in from China, I'm sure is not being taken very well by those in that country, and so they're going to respond eventually, some way, in some form. And as I've always said here on the show, that they're positioning themselves, primarily all the Eastern nations, to be able to do business outside of the dollar. So things such as this, sparking a trade war, sparking a currency war, will only force people to think beyond the dollar. But I'm sure that might be a part of the plan. Just give an idea of what the weaker dollar actually means. Here's something from Investopedia that kind of gives it a very simplistic meaning. It says a weaker dollar is a situation where the U.S. dollar value is decreasing relative to one or a basket of foreign currencies. It says essentially a weaker dollar means that a U.S. dollar can exchange for fewer amounts of foreign currency. It says in response to the Great Recession, the Fed embarked on an infamous quantitative easing where it purchased large sums of treasuries and mortgage-backed securities. In turn, the buyer market rallied, which pushed interest rates in the U.S. to record lows. After interest rates fell, the U.S. dollar weakened substantially over the period of 2 years. From 2009 to 2011, the U.S. dollar index fell 17%. So here we have just a couple things here from around Twitter, some thoughts being shared here. I thought I would just check in here and see what's going on. It says, here's something. It says, fuel, meet fire. U.S. Treasury Mnuchin says the weaker dollar is good for the U.S. The dollar already on the slide falls further to fresh 3-year low. Then we have some more comments from the Hill. It says, Andy Hoffman, I have spoken on the USTPD, the U.S. toilet paper dollar, as he says, but it's starting to look like it could be a big 2018 story. Obviously, a weaker dollar is good for us. It relates to trade and opportunities, quoting Steve Mnuchin. So just to give you an idea of what it actually looks like on a graph, the Dixie on a graph says U.S. currency index. So here we have the dollar in regards to other major currencies. It's at 89.2 as we speak, 89.5. So if you just wind out a little bit and take it back and go back in time, you can kind of get an idea of where we're at. And so the last time it's been this low was back in 2014. And so it just goes on and on. It was, even lower prior to that. So the idea that the dollar is weakening is alarming because it's been high over the last 2 or 3 years. But yet at the end of the day, what people really don't seem to take to heart is the idea that the consumer dollar, which is actually what we're holding in our pockets, what we have in our bank accounts and things of that nature, that instrument in and of itself has depreciated 96, 97% in regards to what it can actually purchase. So the idea that the Federal Reserve note right now is under massive pressure because it's weakening on a global stage is quite alarming. But even more so here in our own country, the fact that that same note is going to cause us to have more problems as far as what we can repurchase, just because the Federal Reserve note, aka the dollar, at the end of the day is not designed to retain value. And so the fact that it doesn't have the same purchasing power today as it will, say, next year or the year after that, is a sign that the idea of holding solely pieces of paper is not a good thing in and of itself. And so to counteract that, it's always good to have something that is able actually to store some value. And that usually tends to fall in things such as precious metals, which are and have been sound money from the beginning of time. And so I just want to take a time and share with you my thoughts on what's happening and the idea that the value of the dollar is dropping, but yet that means the price of the metals or the amount of paper needed to purchase a single coin will go up. And so at the end of the day, you'll be worthwhile having some coins in exchange for those dollars so that you can retain some of your purchasing power and be able to benefit as well as not lose a lot as our monetary policy continues to erode our national currency. So other than that, hope all is well. Look forward to hearing your thoughts on these articles as well as this news update. Have a good day.